Henry Cowell Redwoods State Park is one of the most diverse places on the face of the earth. A place of beauty and wonder, filled with so many remarkable treasures that it's hard to know where to begin exploring. Most visitors start with the awe-inspiring redwoods, Sequoia sempervirens, the tallest trees on the planet. Hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world come each year, drawn by the spectacular height and amazing growth forms of these magnificent trees. Walking through the grove of old-growth redwoods, it's easy to fall under the timeless spell of these majestic giants. But these colossal trees are only one of many incredible natural wonders to be experienced in Henry Cowell. Just past the entrance sign to the park is the Meadow, a remnant of earlier human land uses. Relatively small in size, it provides habitat to an extensive variety of plant and animal life. Before spring officially begins, tender young shoots of new grass sprout, offering a supply of nourishing food to hungry deer after a long winter's diet of dry vegetation. They seem fairly unconcerned with the presence of humans and dogs and the occasional horse and rider passing by. In a few short weeks, the meadow is filled with lush green grass. Arroyo willows, growing along the edge of the clearing, begin to bloom. Each tree contains either male flowers covered with pollen or female flowers filled with plump capsules, which open to release fuzzy seeds to be spread by the wind. Green is the color of the month in May. Most of the deciduous riparian trees lining the edge of the meadow have leafed out, and the grass has shot up so high that in places it's as tall as a deer. The white-tailed kite can often be seen suspended in the air over the open field. Skillfully using its tail feathers as a rudder, it hangs effortlessly over one spot before diving to the ground after its prey. Black phoebes come to hunt insects. Ground squirrels also make their home in the meadow, providing food for a number of predators, including larger raptors and coyotes. Suddenly, 4 sets of very large ears become alert. A coyote has appeared, hunting for gophers, ground squirrels, and other small mammals. It would take a pack of coyotes to bring down a full-grown deer, but a lone coyote poses a real threat to a fawn, and the wary deer keep a close watch on it until it passes. A great blue heron, well camouflaged among tall brown stalks, also finds the meadow a favorite hunting place. As though in slow motion, it patiently stalks its prey. It dines on everything from insects, frogs, and small rodents to impossibly large gophers which seem too enormous for it to swallow. But it does. Because the park is situated in the San Andreas Fault Zone of the Santa Cruz Mountains, its landscape has been, and still is, subject to constant tectonic activity and stress of an incredible magnitude on a scale of time and space we can barely imagine. Crustal squeezing and folding have caused lateral and vertical faulting, as well as uplifting and downdropping of ridges and valleys. This tectonic activity has resulted in the sweeping vistas, landscapes, and diverse biotic communities that make Henry Cowell Redwood State Park so unique. Looking across the meadow at the steep eastern-facing flank of dome-shaped Ben Lomond Mountain, we're actually seeing where the vertical motion of the Ben Lomond Fault took place. Skirting the edge of the Meadow Trail wanders back and forth through the overlapping transition, known as an ecotone, between the Meadow community and the riparian forest community. In the spring, it's a treasure trove of blooming wildflowers. A rare patch of giant wake robin, a large species of trillium, can be found growing right beside the trail. The name trillium comes from the patterns of three that occur throughout the plant's anatomy, from its large leaves all the way down to its smallest flower parts. Fresh miner's lettuce appears in abundance, and large groups of bleeding hearts are covered in delicate pink blossoms. Henry Cowell contains one of the largest stands of white alder, black cottonwood riparian forests remaining in California. It stretches along the San Lorenzo River from the upper watershed all the way into Santa Cruz. Riparian trees are adapted to living near a stream or river, in the river channel itself, along the riverbank, or in the sandy soil of the floodplain surrounding the river. Firs and redwoods are not as adapted to being flooded over and over, and seldom grow here, needing more compact soil where their roots can anchor. Lush riparian vegetation is prime territory for birdwatching, providing ideal habitat for a wide variety of birds, like the orange-crowned warbler and the spotted towhee. Catkins on bare cottonwood branches are soon followed by leaves and seeds, which collect in large cotton-like clumps on the damp ground near the river. Fallen sticks and twigs along the riverbank provide excellent nesting material for birds like this Steller's jay. As summer approaches, bare foliage over the river trail is transformed into a dense green canopy, and the San Lorenzo River, swollen from winter rains, rapidly recedes, creating the ideal water level for spawning steelhead. At the inflatable diversion dam along the Zianti Trail, steelhead are caught to monitor the numbers, strength, and health of their population. The male steelhead is easily identified by its long, pointed nose, a sharp contrast to the female's more rounded nose. Many fish bear mammal predation marks, evidence of their hard-won journey up the river. An occasional Sacramento sucker makes its way into the trap as well. After various measurements are taken, the fish are quickly released. The fish share the river with a number of ducks. Mallards, the most widespread duck in North America, are a common sight all along the river. Characterized by a green head, large yellow bill, white neck ring, and a blue patch on the trailing edge of the wing, the male mallard is no less spectacular for its familiarity. Less colorful than the male, the female mallard is nevertheless quite lovely. The male common merganser is mostly white, with a black back, green head, and a red bill. The female, with her bright rusty head and gray body, looks like a completely different species. The shy wood duck is a fairly uncommon sight in the park, often hiding under vegetation along the riverbank. The male puts on a showy display of many vibrant colors, while the female is camouflaged in much subtler tones. Swimming into the open, she calls for her babies, which soon appear, bobbing like little puffballs behind her. The secretive green heron is rarely seen in the open. A solitary bird, it usually remains hidden in the shadows. Nearby, a mother merganser appears, watching over 9 fluffy ducklings. Among the few ducks that regularly eat fish, these precocious babies are already proficient underwater swimmers. The heron squawks suddenly, and in a split second they disappear beneath the surface, popping back up a moment later. Climbing onto a sunny log, they warm themselves and take a short nap under their mother's watchful eye. In a little while, they're on their way upriver. At the confluence of the San Lorenzo River and Eagle Creek, an important change begins to take place in the geology of Henry Cowell, and therefore in the river. The canyon walls become markedly steeper, and the riparian forest narrows into a slender strip, which is able to survive the rockier terrain. Redwoods can be seen growing much closer to the water, and the river begins to run over exposed granite bedrock. The geological history of Henry Cowell Redwoods State Park is particularly evident in the lower part of the park in the gorge, where the steep granite walls of the canyon and the large boulders and rocks bear a striking resemblance to river canyons in the Sierra Nevada. When the Sierra Nevada formed, a giant molten granitic core rose up from deep within the earth and melted, cooked, and metamorphosed the overlaying sedimentary rocks into layers of schist, limestone, and quartzite. At some point, geologists believe a large piece of the southern Sierra, which included Ben Lomond Mountain, broke off and moved north along the San Andreas Fault Zone. From time to time it was covered by ancient oceans, which laid down sedimentary deposits of mudstone and sandstone over the harder granite and metamorphic rocks. About 3 to 5 million years ago, the San Lorenzo River formed and began to cut down along the Ben Lomond Fault. This played a major role in grinding up and carrying away granitic and metamorphic debris. Even though the Ben Lomond Fault is believed to have been inactive for over 100,000 years, the effects of its action are still strikingly evident. A similar geological story can be seen in the Fall Creek unit of Henry Cowell, where Fall Creek cuts down through the steep eastern slope of Ben Lomond Mountain. The air is alive with the sounds of water tumbling over large rocks of granite and metamorphic limestone. Large woody debris from fallen trees slows the speed of the descending creek, forming small pools and waterfalls which cleanse and aerate the water. In this lush garden, unusual and rare native plants and moisture-loving ferns thrive. They include the lacy five-fingered fern, the giant chain fern, the sword fern, and the large and delicate lady fern. Growing along the creek is Aurelia, also known as spikenard or elk clover, which reaches heights of over 6 feet. There is also false Solomon seal, which carries a strong scent of roses when it blooms in the spring, and the lovely trillium known as western wake robin, a relative of giant wake robin. Its small petals form above the leaves on a short, slender stalk, turning from white to pale lavender as the flower matures. Oblivious to the pristine beauty around them, industrious landowners of the late 1800s, their imaginations filled with thoughts of wealth, clear-cut vast forests of massive 1,000-year-old redwoods, along with smaller hardwoods, for firewood to fuel the hungry kilns burning night and day to make lime for mortar and plaster from the abundant limestone formations on Ben Lomond Mountain. Remnants of the historic lime kilns and limestone quarry just above them can still be visited today. In the lower part of the gorge, in the area of the San Lorenzo River known as the Rincon, which means bend in Spanish, history and beauty mingle once again. Under the riparian canopy are the remains of an old dam, used for diverting nearly all the water in the river through a giant wooden flume down to the powder mill, which provided black powder to most of the West Coast from the 1860s to the beginning of the 1900s. For a while, the riparian forest widens. Inviting little paths wander through black cottonwoods and sycamores, past rarely seen plants like ninebark and osoberry. Several species of willow grow in thickets along the edge of the river. Like the arroyo willows in the meadow, their fuzzy seeds are designed to be carried on the wind. As the land formation levels out, so does the river, forming a series of still, serene pools and riffles. Alders and willows at the edge of the water provide shade, necessary to keep temperatures cool for young fish and other aquatic life. Down in the canyon, it's hard to gain a perspective of the river's immense change in direction as it's forced northward by the massive granite wall of the mountainside. From above, the shift is clearly evident. The river runs north for several hundred yards before curving back once again to continue its journey south through Santa Cruz to the ocean. In spring, the canyon slopes above the gorge put on a dazzling display of globe lilies, and small patches of Douglas iris are scattered throughout the forest. As the trail climbs in elevation, the redwood forest gives way to live oaks and firs of the mixed evergreen community. And as the rise in elevation continues, the soil on the eastern side of the river becomes more sandy, and the mixed evergreen vegetation gives way to the sandhills communities. Within the mixed evergreen and sandhills communities, there are damp ravines like the one along Columbine Trail, where many other unique wildflowers grow. There are blue witch, also known as nightshade, the intoxicatingly fragrant western azalea, and gorgeous crimson columbine. The sandhills in the upper campground area are remnants of a relatively young geological formation known as Santa Margarita Sandstone. It's hard to imagine, but a long time ago, roughly 9 to 12 million years ago, these hot, dry sandhills were formed about 300 to 400 miles south of their present location, in an ancient inland seaway that is believed to have extended all the way into the San Joaquin Valley. Eventually, the sandy formation was vertically displaced along the Ben Lomond Fault, as much as 650 feet in some places. As the mountains were squeezed, pushed, and lifted up, and the valley dropped down, erosion caused by the San Lorenzo River divided the sandhills into two main clusters, with the largest grouping on the Henry Cowell side. The smaller cluster is located across the river atop Ben Lomond Mountain, in the Bonnie Doon Ecological Reserve and on the UCSC campus. The largest sandhill maritime chaparral community in the world exists here in the area of Henry Cowell Redwoods State Park. Many beautiful chaparral plants are adapted to growing in these hot, dry, nutrient-poor soils. They include chamise, yerba santa, sticky monkey flower, and deerweed. Scrub jays are often seen here, well adapted to these surroundings. Among the numerous, unique, rare, and endangered plants which only occur in these sandhills is the silver-leaved manzanita. Adaptations like fine silvery hairs that reflect the sunlight help it to survive this intense environment. The fruit of the manzanita, which means little apple in Spanish, provide a rich source of food for a variety of wildlife. Ponderosa pine, with its distinctive puzzle bark, is an indicator species and key component of the Sandhill Parkland community. It has evolved here over millions of years. Normally occurring in the Sierra at much higher elevations, these particular pines are adapted to living at lower elevations in these sandhills. Differences in characteristics like cone structure lead some scientists to believe that these trees are a unique subspecies of Ponderosa pine, or an entirely separate species altogether, found nowhere else in the world. Knobcone pines are another integral part of the sandhill community. Shorter in stature and more spread out than Ponderosa pines, their cones are attached directly on the branches and remain there for the life of the tree, only opening to release their seeds after a wildfire or other very intense heat. Summertime in Henry Cowell can be a time of serenity and ease. Sycamores are covered with a profusion of giant green leaves, adding to the river trail canopy and furnishing a shady oasis for hikers and horseback riders. There's an abundant food supply for wildlife, like western gray squirrels and California towhees. The calm waters of summer provide perfect places along the river for young fingerling fish to develop. Though preferring a leisurely pace, they can move very quickly when the need arises, as when they're being chased by hungry mergansers. The meadow in summer is brimming with wildflowers. Wild mustard and radish, vetch, checkerbloom, suncups, lupin, and California poppies all combine to form a riot of color. As time rolls by, the bright colors of summer begin to fade to hues of golds and browns and greens. Tall, dry grasses provide excellent camouflage for two spotted fawns grazing in the lower meadow with their mother. In the upper meadow, a doe has captured the fancy of a hopeful young buck. Captivated by her scent, he moves closer, and she moves away. Eventually, she leaves the meadow. And he trots faithfully after her. With the approach of fall, even the vibrant blossoms of the long-blooming sweet pea die back. And Meadow begins to bloom. Even as the seasons change, life continues. A small stink beetle makes its way through the dry grass. The coyote continues its hunt. Hammock spiders form apartment complexes in the rough ridges of redwood bark. And families take long, leisurely walks through the forest. Soon, autumn tones begin to color the landscape. Poison oak turns a deep red. Blue elderberries ripen. Townsend's warblers begin to arrive for the winter. And fuzzy seeds of baccharis, also known as coyote brush, provide a feast for bush tits and other small birds. As ocean currents begin to reverse and winds come out of the northeast, the rustle of drying leaves fills the air. Deciduous trees begin to shed their leaves, carpeting the forest paths in many colors. The river, at its lowest level of the year, flows at a lazy pace, and gathering clouds carry the promise of rain. Sometimes sooner and sometimes later, the promised rain arrives, bringing with it rejuvenation and a new energy to the forest. A fallen sycamore lies in giant testimony to the power of wind and water. Awakened from its summer reverie, the river picks up speed, surging toward the sea and carrying away anything in its path that's not nailed down, cleaning up old debris and making way for a new cycle. Alders and willows are well suited to holding their ground against the powerful current, slowing erosion and stabilizing riverbanks. At sunset, the river runs red, reflecting a deep pink sky. The arrival of winter brings a dynamic energy to the forest. Almost overnight, it takes on a whole new dimension. Mosses, dormant since late spring, swell with life and color. Though it appears to be one continuous mass, in reality, this vivid green blanket is a collection of different moss species with fascinating names like Isothecium, Vicidens, and Kenbergia. Turkey tails, a bracken fungus, and lung lichen thrive in this weather. And mushrooms can be found sprouting everywhere. Oyster mushrooms, witch's butter, and red hygrophorus are only a few. Bright yellow banana slugs are a common sight sliding through the forest. Less often seen out in the open is the native snail. Fetid adder's tongue blooms along the moist redwood floor. Its name is derived from the fact that its lovely purplish blossom produces a mildly unpleasant odor which most likely attracts flies as pollinators. As its flowers mature, they droop down and plant themselves in the ground, from which the plant has received a second name, slinkpod. In the sand hills, manzanita are covered in bell-shaped blossoms. Their lovely red bark glistens like a jewel in the rain. Many people still enjoy the trails, while others head straight for the visitors center. As heavy rains pass and storms subside, the forest begins to dry out. Winter's end eventually arrives. Puddles along the river trail recede, and the sun's welcome light returns. And with it comes the promise of another year filled with new wonders to discover and explore.